Hello, all listeners, and welcome to this episode of Hacker Talk. My name is Philip, and I will be your host during today's show. If you've been to various InfoSec conferences and you've seen someone that carries around this strange design backpack with antennas sticking out of it, then you've probably seen today's guest. Yes, today we have the pleasure of having the hardware hacker, creator of Wifi Cactus, watcher of a Defcon's Wi-Fi networks, reverse engineer, the list goes on and on. It's a pleasure to have you on Hacker Talk, Mike Spicer. How are you doing today?
Oh, really good. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
It's really fun to have you on the show. And but before we deep dive into Wardriving and all things Wi-Fi, I want to know, how did you get here? What sparked your interest for technology and hacking?
It really started with the idea and curiosity of people saying things are dangerous, things are going to get pwned, and that always just made me really think, what can I do to see how that's happening? Because I was bringing devices to conferences, I was bringing phones, I was bringing laptops, and I personally have not had a device that's been compromised. Do a relatively basic security, even in the beginning, before I started doing all these crazy Wi-Fi projects and stuff, I would still do some basic hygiene, but I was always told that, oh, we're going to get super hacked at the hacker conference. And I've also just been extremely curious my entire life. I've always been ooh, internet, how can I get access to all the information? How can I get access to, reading all the ebooks and all the software? And how can I get access to all the games? And so I've kind of always just had this natural curiosity that's really driven me. And so when somebody tells me something that, is an absolute statement, it's I want to know why. So that's really what got me into it. It was just digging into it and trying to figure out, what is the basis of this? And then it turned into, it got a little out of control. So
do you know if there was any light bulb moment where you were like, wow, security is really cool, and this is something I want to allocate more time to?
Absolutely. When I was a little kid in the early 2000s, late 99, 2000 timeframe, I started screwing around with software and was trying to cheat at video games and trying to figure out, how to get free access to software that I couldn't afford. I grew up pretty poor, and I was very fortunate to be given a computer and access to a computer. And, that's really what drove me trying to want to learn about security and how different software was locked, how to make the internet connection faster through compression, those types of things. I was literally on Dialup and, just trying and then hearing cool stories about, friends of mine doing neat projects and tricks, and this is in the time too, when it's there was software being released that was just devastating Windows because there was no security at the time. And that really was just ingrained in me from a really young age that I always wanted to be involved with computers, computer security, and hacking, and just always wanted to be involved with trying to figure out how things work under the hood. And that's when I started doing a little bit of software programming, learning about, web-based programming too. And then it kind of just grew from there. And specifically light bulb moments, there's been probably a bunch of different light bulb moments throughout my life and my career. And it's always seems at 2, 3 a.m. when everything is stumped and you're not sure if you're going to find a solution. It's click. Oh, I know how to do this. I can figure this piece out. It's I need to add more radios. And so I think I've had a lot of those light bulb moments that have really been the driving force behind the projects that I've built and the projects that I've worked on for people. And so, yeah, I wouldn't say there's been one tiny light bulb moment. Well, actually, there's one big light bulb moment, and that was probably the movie Hackers. That was probably the most influential thing on me when I was a kid, too. The movie Hackers, yep, the original. So that was pretty influential. That was, I wish I grew up in New York, but it's rural Utah instead. So we tried to make the best of what I had.
That's cool. That's awesome. That movie is still a great movie, I think. We were talking about it the other day because I have this friend that I meet up with every 6 years, and we get together and we watched it, Hackers from 1995. We've been doing it.
Hack the planet.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
How did you get into Wardriving, and what was your kind of first Wardriving experiment?
Well, I remember when I was a lot younger, it was originally I was trying to find internet access. And also, I didn't have very many access to computers that actually had wireless. And so the whole idea of being able to like see my neighbor's Wi-Fi, I remember the first Wi-Fi adapter that I bought was an Orinoco gold PCMCIA slot. And that was like $200 or $300. I saved money up for a long time to be able to get that. And it was like, oh my gosh, I can see other people's Wi-Fi and I can just get on their network. Like that blew my mind. And I've always been really obsessed with wireless. The whole idea that it's all the way around us, you can't see it, but it's able to do magical things. And then also the optimization side of it too. It's like, I've always wanted to, how far can I go? How long of a link can I make? And so there's been that aspect of it as well. And that actually all drove me to actually doing a startup wireless internet service company in the mid 2000s, so like 2010 timeframe. And, actually ran my own wireless internet company. So it's kind of all of that curiosity boiled up to the point where I'm like, I can get better internet than what everyone else around me is offering with some crappy DSL with the wireless technology we have. And so that was...
users did you serve?
We grew it to about 250 customers and then sold to a larger ISP. So considering how small of an area where I'm from and where I live, it was quite an accomplishment. I was very happy with. And the other thing too is when you're doing that type of work, turns out the internet for people is like life support. And so it's like if it goes away even for 5 minutes, and sometimes wireless just doesn't work. There may be like a lightning storm and there may be interference. There may be somebody driving a truck with a giant metal thing in the back of their truck that's all of a sudden going to cause interference. And it's going to stop things working. And if people freak out, and that, I just couldn't take that. I couldn't deal with that. That was hard. I learned a lot of really hard lessons by building up that company from the core infrastructure, fiber optic backbones, wireless access points. We had, I think, about 12 or 13 tower sites. I also had a bunch of people that helped me with it as well. It wasn't just me, but, there was a lot of things that were just me in that and a lot of lessons. But so, yeah, that kind of further pushed me down this Wardriving rabbit hole, just knowing how much commercial stuff there is in the wireless too. So, yeah. And then finally with like, just everything has radios in it. And we're getting more and more. And that whole idea that, what can be leaked, what information's out there, what radios people are leaving on and don't realize, that's all really interesting to me. So.
Absolutely. The entire radio and SDR world, it's truly fascinating. Do you have any other radio frequency than Wi-Fi that you're looking into?
Absolutely. And that's one thing that like over the years, I've always been really fascinated and trying to do is get involved in different radio frequencies because, Wi-Fi is awesome and, it does a lot of things for us, but there's just a whole plethora of things that are being thrown on various spectrums. So in the last few years, I've started doing quite a bit of scanning for LoRa and LoRaWAN stuff, propagated mostly by this blockchain project called Helium that I'm really interested. Like I opened up one of the devices and it's on the inside. It's like literally a Raspberry Pi that has an Adafruit LoRa connector. And I'm just like, you're selling this for $400 and even $600. And then people are reselling them and scalping them for $1,200. And I'm like, this is $80 worth of hardware, right? Maybe. And that's like really markup. And so I don't know. It's that type of stuff that really gets me when it's like, okay, well, what's the secret sauce here? And then I'm always suspicious of blockchain stuff. I always want to know what the real world use case is. And and then there's also another network called the Things Network. Is it the Things Network? Yeah, I think it's the Things Network, which is a LoRaWAN based IoT infrastructure for building out your own LoRaWAN. But they help supply some of the gateway stuff. So that's all stuff that I was like really interested in, especially with the announcement of Amazon Sidewalk and them turning devices that you've purchased that may just randomly turn into hotspots for these IoT, Amazon connected IoT devices. Like there's so many things that get interconnected nowadays that just, it's really fascinating to me. And so I've started scanning in there. Traditionally, I've been interested in like 900 megahertz for Wi-Fi because of the long range of it, and there isn't a lot of bandwidth there, so its speeds aren't usually great, but it's awesome for non-line of sight applications. I've always been really interested in cell. I started looking into some CDMA 3G stuff some years back when OpenBTS, I think it's OpenBTS, which was the cell site simulator, came out with the Blade RF. I've always wanted to do 4G and 5G research, just haven't had the opportunity. I've been able to look at some
during the 3G research.
So not really, because there's so much stuff that's transitioned away from it. And the other thing too is a lot of the things that work with that, it has to be in transmit. And when you're transmitting those frequencies, it gets kind of sketch. So it was more or less just me experimenting with it and seeing what I could see. I did see some interesting connections. Like I have some different phones. I have like a ton of phones that I use for wiggling. And it's interesting, the ones that are able to communicate to these 3G sites. And it was kind of reinforcing of kind of the Stingray stuff that was happening maybe 5 or 6 years ago, where Stingrays, 3G Stingrays were being quite publicized. And it's just like, well, the reason is because these devices just want to connect to whatever they see. So, and that was true of some Samsung S5s that I had. So those are the devices that I was able to, as far as like any sort of interesting research, as far as like encrypted data or anything like that, I haven't really gotten down that rabbit hole. But, it's still fun to set it up, figure out how the nuts and bolts of it work, and, in a lab type environment. Yeah. And that's just part of my natural curiosity. I'm constantly trying to figure out the things that I can mess with, the things that I can break. And a lot of the things I do are based on open source software. And the community's been huge and helpful in setting these things up. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. So I'm really interested hearing about the Wi-Fi Cactus. What is sparked the idea to build it?
It kind of was like a transition of ideas, or like year over year, thinking about ways to improve the projects that I built. So it really came about and started because of a project box that I built. Basically just this tiny little single board computer with a couple of wireless radios attached to it over USB. Threw it in my backpack, was walking around with it at the conferences, and at first around my neighborhoods and stuff, just to see if it would work, kind of proof of concept it. And, and then after doing analysis and looking at the data, I just determined that this is missing information. It's not doing the things that I want. I had much higher expectations of it, that it would do better. And then it really just became an iteration process of, this is why it failed. And the reason it failed is I was using the wrong tools. I was using AeroDump, which is built very streamlined to strip out any of the data that's not going to be useful for cracking passwords, for example. So I was using the wrong tools. I wasn't very comfortable with the tools. I was very new to some of these in-depth tools. I was very comfortable with like packets and packet captures, but not specifically like wireless captures. That was a little bit new, the physical frames. And then so as I'm going through the process and looking through the data, I'm like, I want to see this, and I want this to work, and I want these pieces of information. And then I went to the community, asked for help, and they pointed me in the right direction. And with doing that, they also introduced me to new ideas. And then I started having ideas too, like, okay, well, what if I add more radios? What if I add these pieces to it? So that ultimately led to originally starting with that one little box, then moving to 12 boxes that had upgrades. Also, Wi-Fi hasn't been the same standard, right? We started with 802.11a, B, and now we're up to AX, technically Wi-Fi 6 with the new naming scheme. So it's changing too and iterating. And it's like, I don't want to miss any of that new information either, right? So I want to make sure I'm getting all of it. So the iterations happened. And then as I'm building these projects out and started showing that, I can successfully build these projects, I was talking to Darren Kitchen at ShmooCon some years ago, and it just spilled the ideas. I'm like, man, I want to capture everything. I want to do all these things. And he's like, I think I can help you with that. What would you need? And I'm like, I don't know, like some maybe 50 radios, 30, 40 radios, and he's all done. And then within a week, he had a box shipped to my house of all these pineapple tetras, 25 of them to be exact. And I was like, crap, now I got to build this. And so, and ultimately came down to what would it take to cover the whole spectrum with these devices? What would that look like? And we were pretty close. I covered about 80% of the entire Wi-Fi spectrum in 2.4 and 5 gigahertz on 802.11n. So I was super pleased with that. The way it all came together, put all the pieces. I haven't seen another tool that's like that, that's able to cover that much spectrum and also is mobile too. So I know there's a lot of people building some really cool stuff, and I love it. I love seeing all these projects. It's very inspiring, and I'm just so happy to be a part of this community and have the support and the help that I've had to be able to do these things. So,
what's the technology behind the Wi-Fi Cactus? What is running?
So at the core of it, it's 25 Hack5 Pineapple Tetras, which each of those have two 802.11 AC radios. And then each of those is connected through Ethernet back through a switch to an Intel NUC. That NUC's running Ubuntu on it. And that's doing all the data aggregation and grabbing all the individual packets that are coming from the individual Tetras. And then it's storing that using Kismet wireless and the wireless monitoring software. So then basically it's aggregating all that data back to a main instance of Kismet where it's being stored into a Kismet database. And then from there, I have custom scripts that are running that's making sure that the individual nodes are up and running, making sure the wireless interfaces stay up, because on a solution like that, you end up with situations where interfaces get overheated, weird things happen, some packets get janky, and then, you've got to reboot things. So I tried to make it as robust as possible. So it's basically like 25 little computers connected to a single computer, and then all the controls are being shipped out from there. And shout out to Kismet and Dragorn, the creator of Kismet. Like, he was so helpful. When I first came to him, it was like, hey, I want to hook up 25 Tetras over Ethernet to Kismet as remote nodes. What do you think about that? He was like, let's do it. Let's make this happen. So he provided so much, and it's really been a testament to how awesome Kismet is for the wireless platform. And it's amazing to see, even from where I started using to where it is now, just all the neat stuff that has been included in Kismet. So anyone in your audience that hasn't ever used Kismet, they should definitely go check it out, kismetwireless.org, and play around with it. It's a really cool platform. But so that's the hardware, and then the software. And then I do have some custom things on there to handle making sure the writes are happening properly, make sure that some of the data doesn't get corrupted. And then also for some of the conferences, I was live streaming out real-time data to dashboards. And so that the NUC had an additional wireless adapter on it rather. And then I would connect to a hotspot. And then from my hotspot, I would connect it to another computer. And then I was streaming out data in real time, so we could actually see the dashboard of the Wi-Fi Cactus in real time as I was walking around some of the conferences. Cool. So yeah, that was a really awesome thing that I was able to do with the help of the staff at Defcamp that was at a conference in Romania called Defcamp. So shout out to Defcamp and all the homies in Romania. So I've just had so many really awesome opportunities to do neat projects and do neat things with the data, the presentations, the collaboration, and it's been mind blowing. It's been quite a journey. So.
What do you do after you come home from a conference and you have this like giant loot of data? Or it's like in a candy store and just...
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first, I haven't slept for most of the conference, so I usually hit the bed and sleep for a few days. But beyond that, I do. I come back with huge treasure trove of data, and then it's like, okay, I'm going to town, start analyzing it. And in some cases, like I've caught, hundreds of gigabytes of data, and in some cases, less. And but they're all PCAP files, and Kismet database files. And so it's like, God, how do I get through this? So, fire up Wireshark, fire up my custom script called PCAPinator, which is a tool that helps you do massive amounts of querying on PCAPs, on large PCAP files, fire those up, and then just start digging through to look for interesting things. Some of the things that I typically try to look for is DNS is always fun. There's always leaked DNS queries that are out there, MDNS, and then also search for stuff that people have done in clear text, because I don't know why there's still clear text in this day and age, but there always is something that's been sent out on the clear text. And then, just try to understand what happened, what sort of communications are there. And then inevitably somebody is trolling me. Somebody's trying to throw some data at me to try to see if I caught it in the form of SSIDs, or they'll put it in the payload, and there's somebody's always messing with me. And I know over the years, it's been pretty fun to try to search through and see that, whether it's special messages somebody's left me in SSIDs, or some had some MDNS queries where people were calling me out. It was pretty fun. So, and then there was actually some people who specifically built something and my batteries went dead, so I never caught it. So I feel bad about that too, because it's like, dang it, missed out on that opportunity to see what sort of fun trolley stuff. But, there are always limitations with these types of projects, and conferences are an ever evolving environment. And I try to build that as robust as possible and take into account every, possible scenario. The first iteration of the Cactus, its runtime was only about 30 to 40 minutes off of a lead acid battery before I had to swap the lead acid battery. So, and that thing weighed, like about 25 to 30 kilos. So it was not, it was.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was a lot. And so it took about 10 minutes to swap the battery out. It took 5 minutes just to get it off my back and 2 people. And then I switched to lithium ions, and then that helped it out quite a bit. And I don't know. It's just it's evolving learning process, budgets, trying to make sure you have funds for the stuff. And then after you get it built and put it together, actually making sure you can get the thing to run. So that's the next important part. Can you actually make this collect data? And I think the amount of data that I've collected over the years is a testament to the ability that I've been able to do that. So
that's awesome. Is there any data that you've been really surprised that you found?
One thing that kind of caught me off guard was the DNS queries for Slack. I remember in the heyday of everyone was jumping on Slack and all the projects were on Slack. Now I think most everybody's switched to Discord, or a lot of communities are using Discord more. But like Slack was big, and I remember as I was going through the data, I just kept seeing all these DNS queries because all the Slacks they're subdomains, right? Every new Slack channel you create are subdomains. And so I was just like kind of blown away of all the Slacks that I was able to see. And then it's like, what could you do from there, right? My mind started wandering like, oh, maybe this is super secret Slack that these people are trying to, hide at their Slack club. But now I have their domain. So, now can I, reach out to someone? Could I use that for Twitter? What is the angle? Can I try to request a sign up from that point? It's like, How can I leverage this? I never took that very, very much further, but it was kind of shocking and something I hadn't really thought about. Like, of course there are subdomains. So of course all of your super secret Slacks are going to be in there. So I think that one was pretty shocking. And then as always, I'm always shocked with Apple devices and, how many times people put, John Doe's iPhone. And then if you have a unique enough name, it's like pair that with open source intelligence gathering, pair that with the wireless networks that they've been probing for, pair that with wiggle.net and see where they've been. And it's like, you've got a pretty good picture of someone. And all I did was capture their MDNS probes over open Wi-Fi. And that just is crazy. Like, I don't know, that stuff always blows me away. I think too, something that's been interesting is watching the progression and increase of encryption. I think my first project was in 2015. So it's been quite a while ago that I started doing this. And I think right around that time frame is when Firesheep came out, and there was a lot of people that were still having their websites not SSL by default, not encrypted by default, or they still had the unencrypted option. And it was just really interesting to see how much unencrypted traffic there were. on these open networks. And now it's like, I capture something like at, an open Wi-Fi hotspot, like at Starbucks, and there's not like, it's data. It's encrypted data. There's not as much interesting things to see there. And so, it's awesome to see from a security perspective. Like, I'm all for this. And I hope that, my project has been something that helped prompt some of these things, because we're not encrypting it at the physical layer. We still have open hotspots, but we are encrypting at higher layers. And so I'm all for that, for privacy and security. So
I think, that's a good path that we're going to, more encryption adoption.
Yep.
So you must like know your ways around the Wi-Fi antennas. If someone wants to build like a small, let's say, Raspberry Pi, and they want to go wardriving and build something cool, what antennas do you recommend? For example, I travel, it's pretty clumsy, but I travel around with the Alpha cord.
Right? I've got that exact setup. I've got a myriad of antennas. And it comes down to like a bit of what do you want to do with your capture. One problem that you can run into is if you start using large and high gain antennas, you start getting more information, or you can attack things farther away. And which, depending on your scenario, how you're doing, like what you're trying to accomplish, that may be defeating some of your goal. Like, for example, let's say you're trying to war drive and you're trying to score points on Wiggle, and you want to, contribute meaningful networks to Wiggle. And basically, if you're using a large antenna, you may be capturing things that are, a block away or more, or, larger, farther away. And so you're creating a situation where you're not getting as accurate of information because you are capturing it from so far away. So when I'm net stumbling, when I'm out there trying to score points for Wiggle, I'm typically just using cell phones. I just am grabbing my cell phones that have whatever antenna. Typically they're just PCB antennas, not a lot of gain. And the reason is because I'm going to be driving every one of the streets that I'm going to war drive. I'm about coverage. I want to maximize my coverage. And then the results that are there are going to be more accurate to where I picked up those hotspots. But I'll tell you this, there definitely have been times where it's like, I want to be able to gather as much data from as far as possible. Like, for example, when I'm on a wireless pen test, you want to gather as much data and be in a inconspicuous spot. So I've been parked in adjacent parking lots away from, the target's building, and had, a discrete antenna sitting on the dash as, try to hide it as much as possible, and then have it sitting there. And, I'm trying to get as much data into that network as possible. So I think it really comes down to, what is your objective? And like, for example, the one that you have, like, that's a really good one for war driving, but you are going to get those longer away networks. So let's say, you've got gated communities, or you've got situations where you're using a cell phone, you're not going to be able to get into those anyways physically, but you want to get those Wi-Fi, boom, throw on that little bit larger. I think that one's like a 5 dBi gain Wi-Fi antenna, and do that. And then like for that one engagement that I did, it was actually a Yagi. So it was a very directional antenna. It sits up on the dash. It's about yay big, as big as there we go, about that big. And, sits on the dash, pointed at the target. And, you want to make sure you use the antenna for the job that you want to do. The other thing too is this, as I'm doing packet injection and stuff, I didn't want that to go everywhere around me, because I don't want someone else to detect that I'm doing an attack. So then I'm using a very directional antenna, sometimes a panel antenna or like a Yagi for that. So I think antenna decision and choice is really important. And you also have to take into consideration what frequency you're going to be capturing too, because not all antennas are made equally. Like that one specifically, I do believe is only a 2.4 gigahertz antenna. And so you try to plug that onto a radio that does dual band, and you're going to start having you're going to suffer in that 5 group band. So I think there's a lot of consideration with antenna that you want to take into account when you're doing this. So yeah.
Do you have like some favorite module, or not the favorite models
of Wi-Fi adapters?
Yeah, Wi-Fi adapter. Right.
Yeah. So my favorite one right now is actually the Intel AX210. because it's going to give you that Wi-Fi 6, and it also does 6 gigahertz. Oh, wait, is it 210 or 220? I think it's the 220, excuse me, AX220. So it's a PCI Express module. And that's another thing that's nice about it too, is PCI Express. And so you can put that directly into your laptop, upgrade your laptop with that one. They're like $30 or $40 on Amazon. And if you run a very recent version of Linux kernel, it has inbuilt kernel drivers that have monitor mode and have a bunch of support in there as well. So it's been an awesome. I converted my latest project, the Wi-Fi Kraken Lite, runs that almost exclusively. So yeah, and I've started upgrading to those AX210. I believe it's the 220s that have the 6 gigahertz. So I've been upgrading to that. And the other thing too is the PCI Express M.2 PCIe is really small. It's such a small footprint, and so it's nice. If on the USB side of things, my favorite is the MediaTek MT7612s. There's also a PCI Express version. I think it's the MT7614. And I've used both of those, but the USB ones seem to work best. My previous project, the Wi-Fi Kraken, was built with 14 of those. And I've been really happy with those. Those ones are only 802.11ac though. Not getting into that AX, no 6 gigahertz, but still getting that latest, greatest 802.11ac, or Wi-Fi 5, I believe. 5E is the technical name of it. But again, the nice thing about these adapters is they've got the inbuilt Linux kernel support from the MediaTek. So nice. As long as you're running a recent version of a Linux kernel, I believe beyond 3.29, if memory serves, which anything that you're going to use nowadays, including like Pentoo or Kali Linux, they're already going to have all that built in. You're just going to have a much more stable experience. So
it's going to be plug and play then.
Oh, it's so damn easy. I remember back in the day, like trying to compile my own drivers for the alphas and, a bunch of the RTL stuff. And I believe that I'm the very first one to ever get the RTL 8812s to go into monitor mode, which was the first 802.11n wireless adapter that we were able to get into monitor mode. So, or excuse me, AC. I think it was 8812 was AC. But yeah, so that was a train wreck. They're a really finicky adapter. But I've spent many nights going back and forth between Linux kernels, recompiling, microcode, just trying to get something to work, drivers. And yeah, that's very painful. And now you don't have to. So I'm all about the easy buttons. So shout out to the devs who've done that work.
That's, such a pain in that. Even if it comes to Wi-Fi adapter or graphic card or
this is the pain is real. The pain is real.
Truly is. So something that I'm kind of interesting is that a lot of people talking that do a lot of wireless pen tests is that they're talking about having the client detect the authentication attacks. How common do you see that in the real world where people are actually monitoring for the authentication attack?
It's interesting. The more people that have come to my talks, the more that I'm starting to see in the environment, people deploying like Kismet to be able to do detection. And that, it's so cheap to deploy. You could get a Raspberry Pi, the Pi 4, put Kismet on it, and buy a $30 wireless adapter, and you're up and going, and you can start detecting if you have deauthentication attacks in your environment. And so, and I've been preaching that for a really long time, and I've seen some of it, like some people deploy it, but a lot of times when it's deployed, it's somebody who's doing it outside of the organization or inside of the organization that's doing it because they want to experiment. They want to have fun with it. It's not the organization, committing to it and deploying and that type of stuff. I have seen, though, on enterprise networks, a number of enterprise systems like Cisco and Palo Alto, to name a few, that I know that they do have some detection and monitoring. But then what happens in most cases that I've seen is those logs go to dev null. Nobody's looking at it. Nobody like sees, like the logs happen, everything's there, but it's just people don't have bandwidth, right? And in a lot of those cases, they don't even have a security team. It's the IT people doing the security job as well. And they're already getting user requests, and it's just, it's too much. It's too much. And a lot of times, depending on the business and the threat model, I may be the one on a pen test being the only one that's actually done a deauthentication attack to them. So it may not be a situation where, that's a common attack that may happen. But, at the end of the day, it really just comes down to what their threat model is. And there's a lot of different companies like manufacturing or, I don't know, there's a lot of different places where people have a higher threat risk for this type of behavior, especially an organization who doesn't realize that their Wi-Fi goes, a quarter of a mile, half a mile away because of the way they've got it set up. Right. So it's just, I don't know. It's interesting. It's interesting. And I think more people should be deploying Kismet in their environment, deploying, some IDS on this, because here's the thing. You don't know what attacks have happened on your network unless you have visibility into it. So
a question I got regarding cracking VPA handshakes. Do you have any good best practices for cracking VPA handshakes?
Well, we are truly in the golden age of cracking WPA handshakes right now. I would start with run Kismet, because in Kismet, you can actually one click download the handshake when it's captured. You don't have to do anything active. You can be fully passive. Just set up your box, let it sit for a couple hours. I'm sure somebody's going to connect to the network, grab that handshake. And then my best practices are, once I have the handshake, throw that thing into Hashcat. And then I always start with what's easiest and what's fastest. So my go-to is usually phone numbers. So depending on where you live and the type, always try. You can usually exhaust the whole spectrum of phone numbers pretty fast based off of where you live and how the format is. Here in the United States, it's area code, prefix, and then the number, and that you can run through that really fast, especially if you're in a targeted area and know that, the area code is going to be such and such, if the state has a small number of area codes. The next thing I'll do is I'll throw like RockU at it. I'll throw, some other database dumps at it, exhaust a little bit of time from there. And then I'll usually try to do, people are lazy and they don't want to be typing in, 10, 12, 15 characters on their mobile device when they're connecting to hotspots. So, a lot of times I see passwords that, get up to that 10 length, but not much longer than that. So it's like, how within that key space do I bring that time down, for cracking? And so, I'll try to do some different dictionaries, try to use music lyrics. There's been some fun music lyrics dictionaries that have worked. And then I'll even just try to do mask-based brute force, because a lot of times you'll see word, and then number, 2-digit number, 2-digit year, 2-digit, and so I'll use patterns like that as well to do a mask attack on brute forcing, and try to just bring that, bring the number of possibilities down as much as possible. And at the end of the day, it's once it gets to about 12 or 13 characters, unless it's a common phrase, it's not getting cracked, not with the hardware that I have. And then it's like, okay, well, do I buy more hardware to throw at this? And you start getting into a situation where it's like, okay, I need to 10x the amount of hardware that I have in order to make this a viable crack. And how do I bring that down? How do I make it more realistic to crack? And then, I just give it a stamp of approval that I'm not cracking this one today. So if it takes longer, I usually will try, especially on engagements and stuff, they're usually a finite amount of time. It's like I'm hired to do a job and I have to have a report done in 2 weeks. So at most, I'll spend 5 days on password cracking. If I can't get it within there, then, I'm going to say it may be feasible. I caught your WPA key. It is feasible that it could be cracked at, within a year. It could be, depending on your length, it could be a year, it could be 6 months. I just don't have the hardware to go any harder than that. And then always in the end, I always do a recommendation of 15, 20 characters because that's just going to make it really difficult for someone to crack. So, that's been the way that I always approach approach it and some of the best practices that I do. So
that's really good.
There was a researcher that found that a huge number in Israel were all based off of their phone number. And it was a very common practice for people to use their phone number. So yeah, phone numbers, and then, common phrases is another fun one to do as well. And you can find, dictionaries for this all over the internet.
So what is the Kraken Lite?
The Kraken Lite so the Kraken first was a project where I wanted to take the power of the Cactus, but make it smaller and more conspicuous and have a live screen of information. And it still came out about 25 pounds in a giant case, and it was a pain in the butt to carry. So I'm like, I need to make a lighter version of this. So that was basically where the Lite came in. I ended up condensing it to about half. It was about 8 to 10 pounds in the end. I started using PCI Express adapters, and I doubled the number of capture devices in it. So it has 25 capture devices. Still has a screen in it. It has a laptop display that I use, so I can open it up, and it's kind of like a cyberpunkish laptop. So, and then I'm using an Intel NUC in there again, and then direct access through the Thunderbolt and the M.2 PCI Express slot to run all the PCI Express adapters. So, which is 25 of those wireless adapters. And it's in a hardened little Pelican case, something that I can just take on an airplane with me. It's gone through security a bunch of times. That one, I don't think I've taken internationally yet, but all of the other devices that I've built have all been internationally. So,
how is to walk through customs with the TSA agents with that? With all that?
TSA usually, very frequently I get a secondary scan, so where they have to open it up and look through, and then I just say it's a very specialized wireless test equipment. And they usually are like, meh, okay, and then it's once they look in and kind of poke around a little bit. Customs though, going to other countries, I haven't had any problems. I've taken a lot of my stuff to I've gone to Japan, Romania, the Bahamas. I've taken stuff to China, and I've had really any problems going into those places. It's usually on the way out, coming back to the US. They're like, did you buy this there? Is this stuff that you purchased? Do we need to have you pay taxes on this or tariffs? And do we need to charge you? And I'm like, no, this is a research project. I brought it with me. There's nothing new. I haven't modified or anything. And so like, I usually have some discussion with the United States Customs and Border Patrol about my projects. It's all been really easy, and they just have questions. And almost every time too, whenever I've traveled, I always end up with the TSA golden tickets that say they've opened all of my stuff. I always get those. So I think the problem is there's just too many wires. There's too many metal parts. There's too many things running around weird places that, they got to open it up and see what's inside. So, they usually do a pretty good job of repacking things. So I haven't been too frustrated after getting my stuff opened up. So
that's good. What are some of the best practices you would recommend someone that wants to put up a wireless network at home?
Number one, I would say make sure that you enable WPA2 and or WPA3 if you have that on your system. Remove backwards compatibility unless you have legacy devices. If you have a legacy device that forces you to use a different older WPA standard or TKIP, I would say, maybe even set up a separate access point specifically for that if you can. And then your password length, try to get to that 12 to 15 length if possible. And then separate your IoT devices if you can onto their own network, just so that way stuff that doesn't get patched, doesn't get updated, isn't sitting on your home network. And you do those. I think if you do those few things, it's like you've got a pretty hardened home network at this point. So what security mitigations have you put up in your personal Wi-Fi? Of course. One of the biggest mitigations that I do is anything that I'm running that I'm concerned about or that I'm doing any sort of testing on, I always run it on my cell phone hotspot. So then that way it's completely isolated, completely separated from my home network. I don't introduce new devices onto my main home network unless it's been on my hotspot. And, I'm pretty leery of that. But other than that, I mean, it's kind of the things that I talked about. I do have a few IoT devices. They're sitting on their own infrastructure. Like I've got that LoRaWAN gateway on the Helium network that's sitting on its own network. When I was going through the process of doing some reverse engineering on that, I found an OpenVPN cert, an OpenVPN connection to Alibaba's IoT infrastructure network, which would be really easy for them to come back across that. So depending on how the configuration is, then they've got basically just a node inside of your house. And so, that type of stuff, I just want to make sure that I've got isolation. Another thing that you can do if your access point supports it is client to client isolation. That's always something really frustrating as an attacker. If client to client isolations it turned on, it's really hard for me to communicate to other wireless devices inside of your stuff. So I do that on the IoT network. But I don't do that on my main network because it breaks the ability for my kids' iPads to communicate to each other to play Minecraft. So you gotta have your business use cases, right? Like it's very important that we can play Minecraft together. So,
So what does the future hold for the Kraken Lite? Do you have ideas on rebuilding it, or where is the project going?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think I really want to get 6 gigahertz captured on it. Oh, also the other thing I added with it is RTL SDRs. I think I want to upgrade and get some larger SDRs so I can get, my goal is to get to around 100 megahertz of bandwidth capture on SDRs. So I can be able to do a lot more analysis with that. So I think those are 2 big upgrades that I want to do to it. Get that 6 gigahertz, get that 100 meg of bandwidth on the RTL SDRs. And then I think that project is I'm really happy with where it is. It's about 12 hours of battery life. Maybe build another version of it that has proper cooling. So then that way I can just run it closed and just run it fully incognito. Right now, I do have to have the lid open a little bit when I do run that. So, but those are some of the things that I have kicking around in my head for modifications from there. And it's been a really fun, rewarding project. So
awesome. I'm looking forward to hearing where it goes. So we almost hit an hour now. Thank you so much for joining me on Hack Talk in this episode. Do you have anything that you want to touch more deeper on, or think that I have forgotten to ask you that you want to deep dive more into?
Oh, that's a really good question. I just be safe out there, everyone, physically, and with all the stuff that's happened with COVID and everything. And then also, get out there and net stumble. Get out there, go join wiggle.net, go download the app on your phone. I think that it's such a golden opportunity to get on the Wiggle scoreboard and see what's in the environment around you. See what Wi-Fi networks are happening, what wireless is happening. We're getting more and more wireless scanning capability that we're able to do. If it really excites you, go get Kismet, go install Kismet, get your work to install Kismet. Let's get some more Kismet deployed. And just have fun with it. Have fun. Look at the data, go get your hands dirty. All the projects that I've done are because I've been curious and then went and built a thing. And I just think that there's just an infinite amount of learning opportunity when you're trying to put things together and make them work together. So I would just encourage everyone to go give that a shot. So
absolutely. Thank you so much for joining me on Hacker Talk, and I hope to have you on in the future.
Yeah, definitely. This has been fantastic. I appreciate it.
Next iteration of Kraken Lite will be. All right, all listeners, thank you for tuning in to Hacker Talk. I'll see you in the future. And as always, all links are in the show notes. Have a good one. Ciao.
See you.